Iceman, Jean-Yves Theriault.
They called him the Iceman because locking eyes with Jean-Yves Theriault was like staring into a void, experiencing the same intimidation as catching the eyes of an apex predator. Though his attitude earned him the nickname, it was his results that reinforced it, because Theriault had a penchant for knocking opponents out cold. Hailing from New Brunswick, Canada, Theriault cut through opponents in a nearly 22-year campaign where he accrued 61 knockouts in 69 victories. And if the 88% knockout rate didn't already make it clear, Theriault was an incredibly dominant force of old-school kickboxing. He fought the who's who of the full-contact era, including names like Rick Rufus, Don the Dragon Wilson, Rob Kaman, and the eventual K1 champ, Ernesto Hoost. He went unbeaten for over a decade. Theriault was a knockout artist at heart. He was deeply inspired by watching Ali-Frazier, but his first thought was, how much more awesome would it be if they were allowed to kick too? It's kind of terrifying he saw Ali versus Frazier and thought, yeah, but that's not hardcore enough. And from that seed of inspiration, he went about solving a fundamental problem of kickboxing in that time. While it's hard to believe today, kickboxing used to not allow leg kicks. Not only were they not allowed, they were often looked down upon. It's hilarious to listen to commentators and professionals discount leg kicks as wasted effort because of their inability to inflict punishment. The effect on the sport was pretty pronounced, because without leg kicks, boxers would just dominate, and major kickboxing organizations had to institute minimum per round kicking requirements to force the kicks back into kickboxing. That's where Theriault came in. He was one of the first competitors in the West to understand and execute on the idea that punches and kicks could work together, finding ways to make it work without leg kicks. Necessity is the mother of invention, and Theriault had an innate desire to kick people until they were unconscious. And he did just that. Even modern-day competitors can learn some inventive tricks on how to set up head kicks with punches and vice versa from Theriault. So let's start with punches and go from there. Theriault threw straight punches to make opponents slip before slamming a kick in the same direction they just moved their head. Even a feint was enough to invoke the defensive response, which he could then use against them. Or he could leave the spent punch out to hold their head in place. If they slipped left, he threw a right kick. And of course, he could throw his left if they slipped to their right. This tactic has been seen often in MMA, from TJ Dillashaw to Leon Edwards' spectacular KO of Usman. Another popular tactic was to throw a swatting cross, inviting opponents to try and dip down and duck under. Once they did, he greeted them with an impactful shin to the chin. Since opponents were moving their head into the strike, it hit hard. He could even use his spent punch to hold their head in place, like holding steady the final nail in the coffin. Theriault also had pretty decent boxing, and he would follow up with uppercuts just as often as kicks. Now let's look at the opposite, how he used the threat of his fight-ending kicks to set up terrific punching combinations. Theriault would often use a rear front kick feint to advance, then shift forward into a right hand. While this strike could hurt opponents, he usually used it to build into other punches. When you see opponents desperately retreating like this, it's usually because they have no idea how to react. It's the natural consequence of a well-built fighting system, where each move can set up an equally devastating move. He would also throw a cross while retracting his rear leg roundhouse. This is getting more and more commonplace today, starting to border on a staple technique. But back then, it was a sneaky, unorthodox attack in full contact karate era. In one of my recent videos, I highlighted Andy Hoog's axe kick and how it paved the way for a straight punch, and I said it hadn't happened before or since. But I was wrong, because here's Theriault styling on his opponent, sweeping his guard away with a crescent kick to land uppercuts. If opponents tried to fight fire with fire, Theriault was exceptional at intercepting their attacks. He could teep, spin back kick, check hook, or angle inside of their punches with a punch of his own. He was particularly fond of getting inside the opponent's hook with the cross. And lastly, Jean-Yves realized the potential when it came to using kicks to corner his opponent so that he could follow up with punches when they had no place to escape to. It's not hard to imagine a world where Jean-Yves would have been successful as a pure boxer. Even still, we should probably attribute much of his boxing prowess to the possibility of kicks. He had an excellent ability to corral opponents into corners with stabbing front kicks and crushing rear roundhouses, something the Thais had known for generations, but was innovative in the West. His hooks and uppercuts paired together were absolutely crippling, shaping the opponent's guard with one punch to create openings for the next. And while I could definitely go into more detail, I'll instead invite you to check out one of the 10 million videos I have on boxing already. Suffice to say, there's still a whole lot you could learn from this old-school Canadian kickboxer.
Jean-Yves is a great champion in the PKA. I have a lot of respect for him.
And if you'd like to learn more about fighting in general, from footwork, power, defense, or how to build your own style, you can check out my technique books, linked below. Or if you just want a good read, check out our comic book series, Mortal Weapons. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian wishing you happy training.